Thanks, Sue. Well, good morning, everybody. Um, I would say it's nice to see you all, but I'm just seeing my face and Sue's face. But I'm going to trust that you're out there. And now I don't even see Sue's face. Now it's just me talking to myself. That's okay.
I'm here, Mason.
I know. Um, so like Sue said, I am in charge of spiritual care at Valley Hospital. And, that's encompasses a lot. The mission of our department is to take care of the spiritual, emotional, and religious needs of patients and families and staff. And so I'm going to talk to you about my experience working in the hospital a bit throughout the pandemic, personally, how that's affected me, and where we are today, what I've learned, and how I think that might relate to you all, and some things that I think have been valuable things that we've learned from this really difficult time together. By way of starting, I think I would just like to invite us to take a couple of deep breaths. Just from my experience, we're all so busy, and the fall in particular, September is such a busy time. And we really, I think most of us set a really high expectation for ourselves for what we're going to do every day. So let's just take a couple of deep breaths. Let's breathe in. And breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. And let's just set an intention for our time together today that we're gonna, be present with ourselves, listen with openness to what I've got to share with you today, and just to be gentle with ourselves and what we face each day, gentle with each other, with our families, whoever we come in contact with, gentle on the road when we're driving, gentle when we're at the supermarket. It's just a time where a lot of people are hurting, a lot of people are struggling. And I think whatever we can do to remind ourselves that we're all human and we're all struggling through this together, the better off we're all going to be. So here at the hospital, things got really bad for a while. I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail, but we were full of really sick COVID-19 patients. We didn't know how to take care of them. It was all new and scary. We were all worried about going into these rooms, about becoming infected ourselves, bringing infection home to our families. So that created a ton of stress. But that wasn't all it created. There were what I would consider to be some positive things for myself personally and for other folks that I've worked with here at the hospital. One of those things is that we were really felt like we had a really high calling to the work that we were doing here. We were getting tons of support from the community. There was a lot of, they were doing parades outside the hospital. The news for weeks and weeks was all focused around healthcare and the struggles we were facing here. I had a couple of newspaper articles where they interviewed me about what we were going through here. So there was this real sense of like being called into action, being really put to really wonderful use. And that felt really good. It felt like the culmination of a lot of training for myself spiritually and for a lot of my colleagues too, that, they would just come to work every day with the attitude that like, this is the work that I signed up for. This is what I do. And I'm gonna come to work every day and I'm gonna face what I've got to face. And that was inspiring and uplifting. And there was all this adrenaline for the first 6-8 weeks really that we were facing this thing back in March when it all began. But then, eventually that adrenaline and that feeling of higher purpose was Um, it was counterbalanced by a real feeling of fatigue and futility. And I can't, uh, it's hard to describe how that feels to just uh, for these nurses and for these doctors in the ICUs not knowing how to get people through this. There was a long time where everybody in the ICU was dying, and we just didn't know what to do to help them get through. So that was a real, burden and a real downside to what we were facing here. One other piece about it for me, which was really helpful, was that out there in the world, there was all this media coverage, and it quickly took on a partisan view lens. So it was a little bit hard to know what information we could trust, right? And so being in the hospital and just coming every day and knowing exactly the number of patients are here, knowing exactly, I'm seeing these patients, I'm seeing what they're going through. So it was just a really tangible lens through which to experience the pandemic. And I know for my wife is stuck at home, I've got all my family, for people who weren't in healthcare, probably many of you too, there was this sense of unreality about the whole thing that, we heard all this stuff on the news, but it was hard to know what the real impact was and if we were at all going to be affected by it. Many of us for a long time didn't know anybody that was sick, and being able to come to the hospital every day, being able to leave the house every day, really it helped me to get through it. So I would try and share what was going on here with my family. I come from Michigan, so a bunch of my family there. It took a lot longer for the pandemic to reach there. So we had, a very different perspective on what it was really all about and what the impact was going to be. And now here we are, it's 18 months later, and it's just poured through the whole country, through the whole world, so that, I don't think anybody doesn't know somebody who's been sick or maybe even died of this illness. It's just, it's been all encompassing. It's taken over. As a chaplain at the hospital, we weren't really permitted into the COVID rooms. We were preserving PPE. Only the most essential people were going into those rooms, to limit exposure. And it quickly became clear that our role in spiritual care and partnering with some other departments was really going to be like taking care of staff. It was really obvious pretty quickly how stressful this was for our frontline workers, everybody here at the hospital, how much they were going to need some emotional support to get through everything that we were dealing with. So my role really shifted, and so I became like caretaker for the organization in a way. And that meant that every day I'm out on the units, I'm talking to staff about what they're going through. I'm trying to help them smile a little bit, just whatever I can do to help people feel like they can get through what they're facing every day. And, as a spiritual care provider, we're not central necessarily to most people's care when they come into the hospital. Most people are really focused on their doctors, their nurses, how those folks are caring for them. But I really felt like our role in spiritual care became sort of central to the organization, helping to process what we were going through, helping to make sense of all of this death we were seeing. We were able to do a couple of memorial services for the staff. We did one in the summer after the first month when we had hit 300 deaths here in the hospital. We did a memorial service virtually. Obviously, nobody's getting together. And then at the year mark, this last March, we did another memorial service where we, just tried to speak openly about what we've been through, speak from our experience, commemorate what we've been through. Um, we struggle in our public life to have meaningful moments that help us to sort of like mark the time and what we've been through. So it felt like a really unique privilege and an honor to be in that role here, to help staff in that way, to put these memorial services together. There's two stories I want to share with you from staff that I think are really touching and difficult, and sort of highlight for you what it is that folks went through here at the hospital. So these stories both revolve around the same patient. This was at the time, and I think still remains, our youngest intubated, our youngest COVID-19 patient in the ICU. So he wasn't intubated for the longest time. He was here with us. This was I think like a 19-year-old kid with pretty severe autism, not very verbal, and his dad was with him at the bedside pretty much all the time. And a lot of the time he was here, he had to wear this BiPAP mask to help him with his breathing because he was having such a hard time. And one particular nurse who was taking care of him one day had helped to change him and clean him up, and she was finishing up, and it looked like through the mask he said, "Thank you." And the nurse looked at the patient, she looked at his dad, and she was like, "Did he just say thank you?" And the dad was like, "No, he doesn't do that. That's a little bit more than he's typically able to do, especially in this state." And they were like, "Well, let's see." So they pulled the mask off, and again he looked at the nurse and he said, "Thank you." And the nurse just got chills, and the dad immediately started crying. It was just this remarkable moment where, like, the care and concern of this nurse really reached through and connected with this young man who really barely communicates verbally, enough so that he was able to feel gratitude for what she was doing for him and to thank her in that way. And just speaking to the nurse about that, in the day afterwards, the dad shared the story with me, and then I was able to talk to the nurse about it, and she was just incredibly moved and really felt like, this is why I do what I do, to be able to help somebody who's suffering and struggling. So that's like a story of something positive we take from the work that we do. On the flip side of that, I came in one Monday and that patient had transferred to a different facility over the weekend. He had gotten intubated and transferred to, I think, Robert Wood Johnson, where they were more equipped to deal with younger patients, and they were going to really escalate his care because he was young. And I stopped to talk to one of the nurses on the unit who I'm friendly with, and I said, "How's it going? How are you doing?" And she's like, "Bad. I'm doing really bad. I just wish we had more hands. I feel like I can't do enough." And I was like, "Really? What's going on? What's leading you to think that, And she proceeded to tell me how she'd been the nurse caring for this young man. She was his nurse on duty the night he got intubated. And one of the things we do for folks who are having trouble breathing is we do respiratory therapy. We do physical therapy where we there's this physical patting on the back that helps to loosen some of the stuff that's in the lungs and can provide some relief and help somebody to breathe. And that night she had two other really sick patients, and they got a lot of her care and concern, and she was able to get chest PT for them, but he had fallen as a lower priority that day, and she wasn't able to get that for him. And consequently, she was feeling like it was her fault that this young man had ended up having to be intubated and transferred to a different facility. And, I know this nurse to be like a really good nurse. She's been at it a long time, and she really cares, and she's always looking at her patients' needs and calling me up and asking me to go in the room and support these folks. And so to hear her tell me that she felt like it was her fault that this young man had gotten intubated. And for us at that time, intubated really, that was a death sentence, because we hadn't, at that point, we weren't seeing people come off of the ventilator. For her to be shouldering that burden just was heartbreaking to me. So I had to, in my role, it's not to, I want to tell her, no, it's not your fault. You didn't do that. You did the best you could. You cared for this guy. Um, but part of what we do as chaplains is to sort of be with people where they're at. So to witness that suffering and to hear her real feeling of guilt, and to recognize that that's something that a lot of people who work in healthcare are feeling, and to know that has to sit alongside that other nurse who had this remarkable connection with that same patient only days before, and to know that this is the back and forth of the work that we do, that some days we're going to be we're going to connect in a way that feels like, there's something holy in our midst, and we're privileged and grateful to be with people in this way. And at other times we're going to feel like we fall short, and even our best efforts are not enough. And that's been the story of being in the hospital for us this last 18 months. So that's a lot. Those are, I'm going to have a sip of water. So for me, personally, it's a lot to sit with these things that I hear day in and day out. This is just a couple of examples of sentiments that I heard every day for months and months and months, and I still hear. And a big part of what I've been doing, and the small group of people that I've been working with, is figuring out how to help the organization be resilient and focus on taking care of ourselves and staff support and balancing the struggles at home with the struggles at work. And, I've been like the face of this movement in a way for the organization. And, the irony is that I've really struggled myself so much with my home life. I've got 2 small kids. My wife's been working from home. She's been trying to manage the kids' educations, while trying to work at the same time. Now my kids are 10 and 8, so they're like, we're going back almost 2 years. They're like 8, 9, 7, which is a really fun year, but it's also like they still really need a lot. And so many days I would just have expended all of my emotional capacity here at the hospital, and I would get home to my family and I just wouldn't have anything left to give, and I would be short-tempered, and my children are energetic and they'd be in my face and they wouldn't have seen anybody else that day, and they would need me to be there to hear what's going on with them and to help them with their, what they're going through. And so many days I just felt like I would fall short as a dad, that I just didn't have what it took, and I would be ornery and lose my temper, and I hated that. I hate that. And but I was just in this mode of like really focused on work, really focused on what I was doing here, really focused on taking care of the whole organization here and shouldering that, and what I've learned is that you can't just you gotta recognize what you're going through, or else you're gonna reach your limit. And for me, I really focus on other people. I've got some basic self-care habits that, in light of the difficulty of the things we were facing, they were falling short and they were falling to the wayside. So how this came to a head, literally, one evening I'm at home, my kids are fighting about, I don't even remember what, they're screaming at each other, and I'm just like this, and the anxiety level just goes through the roof, and I lose my temper. I remember kicking the trash can falls over. I go storming across the kitchen, somebody's left the microwave door open, and I slam the microwave door, and the microwave is right next to the doorway, which leads into the hallway. And I was literally hopping mad. I must have slammed the microwave and jumped into the air at the same time in a rage. And I slammed my head into the door frame. You can't tell from the video, but I'm a tall guy. And I jumped hard enough that my head slammed into the door frame of the hallway, and I went down hard, and my head is bleeding, and then my children are coming over. All of a sudden I'm crying. I go to the bathroom and trying to like rinse all this water out of my hair, and I'm like, oh God, I'm so sorry. Oh, my kids are trying to comfort me. My wife is like, what is going on? And for all of us, this moment really marked like it was scary for my kids. It was, just brought home that I wasn't doing that good, and what I was handling, what I was facing was just like more than anybody should really shoulder. And, that rage, that anger came out, and it literally, it was like I had to get hit upside the head to realize that I needed to take a step back and take some better care of myself. And so that helped me to put that into perspective. And so fast forward, probably almost a year from that, more than a year now from when that happened. And, numbers are down here at the hospital. Lots of people are vaccinated. Ostensibly, things are getting better. We know that it's still with us. We're still hearing about it in the news. There's still closures in schools. A lot of people are still holding out from the vaccine. But there is, this sense that things are improving. And again, 2 weeks ago, I'm out in the park doing a park cleanup with this park cleanup group that we've gotten going in the last several months. And I'm clearing away some trees, and there's this downed limb, and I'm going to move it away. And this other branch, I must have freed it when I pushed this branch over, and it came down on my head. And all of a sudden I'm bleeding again, and I'm right back in that moment. And my wife comes up, and my son comes over, and he was like, "Oh no, Dad, you did it again." And I'm like, crap, I did it again. And to me, it really just goes to the human need and our propensity to make connections when things happen in our lives, and to make a story that immediately this thing happened out of the blue. A branch just fell on my head, but it brought us all back to that same moment we were at a year ago when I had this breakdown, when I was clearly struggling. And so it knocked me down. I had to sit down. I had to take it easy. And it caused me to really reflect and to be like, okay, is this, some of us talking like God language? Is this God trying to send me a signal? Did God drop this branch on my head? Is it just a reminder that I've got to take care of myself? Is it just chance? Do these things just happen? But even if it is just chance, and these things do just happen, it's not chance that in our minds we immediately make connections like this. So, and it brought me right back to that moment where I was in a really bad place and I really needed to take care of myself. And so to me, that's a really valuable lesson, that as humans, we desire, our minds want to make sense of the things we go through. So, and there's so much just chaos with the pandemic, and with the uncertainty, and with our political turmoil and social unrest. It's just, there's so much crazy negativity floating around in the air, and all of us have our own way of making sense of what we're going through. And for some of us, that story is helpful, and it's a story of healing and reconciliation, and there's a progress to it. But for some of us, it's a chaos narrative where things don't make sense. And it's as soon as we get our footing, something else comes in to knock us astray. And so it's important for us to just like look at how we make sense of the information we're presented with day to day, what it brings up for us about this whole year, how we process the information we have. You know, so that was a couple of weeks ago. I took that knock on my head, and I didn't really take it as a wake-up call like I should have, and I've continued to like treat myself badly and not be that kind to myself. And here I am a couple of days ago, I got this just immobilizing back pain. And to me, it started as like a knot in my upper back, and then it sort of spread throughout my shoulders into where I like couldn't move my neck. And this is like, I really believe that if we don't emotionally process what we've been through, that these things come out in our bodies in some way, in our experience of the physical world. And so this immobilizing back pain, I mean, it's a stress, it's a product of the stress that I've been under and everything I've been going through here. So I ended up in the doctor's office yesterday needing something to help me like move my neck. So the point I'm trying to get across is that it's really important that we deal with what's going on inside of ourselves, because if we don't reconcile with what we've been through, with what we're going through, it's got a way of coming up and biting us. So we either deal with what's going on inside of us, or it's going to deal with us. That's what my friend Sue always says. And in terms of the pandemic and in terms of what we're facing right now, a lot of us, we really just want it to be behind us. We want to put it in the rearview mirror. And that's a totally natural way to feel. And, there are some respects that we're returning to normal. But like I said, there's also these elements that are just really still present with us. And I think it's really important that we recognize that, like, whatever we've been through this year, it's been a struggle, and it's still inside of us to be dealt with, and that we really need to take responsibility for our own emotional balance, our own emotional well-being, or else it's going to come out in these ways. I mean, I don't know, even just driving on the road, it feels like the aggression and stuff and like the crazy driving is worse. We're seeing here at the hospital that our incidence of abuse towards staff from family members has gone up, that people are belligerent and they're more rude and they're tired of, we still have visitor restrictions. People are tired of that stuff. And so this is the emotional temperature of our world, of our country, of our community, of our families right now, is that things have been hard. And we are, we're all hanging out here where these like difficult, angry, angsty, anxiety, it's not that far below the surface. And in order to heal, in addition to getting the vaccine and being responsible in that way, we have to reconcile with like spiritually and emotionally what we've been through. The thing I'm always talking to people about is how our brains and the neuro wiring in our brains have changed as a result of the pandemic. So the way that I characterize this, and this is based upon research that is not my own, but it's not just me off the cuff, is that our brains are really hardwired to pick up on negative threats in our environment. This is like a biological imperative. It's helped us to survive as a species, to recognize when there's something in our environment that is dangerous to us, that is threatening. And those things trigger lots of things in our brain so that we can respond to that threat in such a way to maintain survival. And this whole last year, there have been threats left and right to our well-being, to our survival. So we've had to become really attuned to what we're touching and how close we're getting to people and where we're going and what we're going to be exposed to. And this is all hardwiring our brains to be on high alert to threats. And that serves us in the short term to protect us. But in the long term, that wiring is not going to serve us in the sense of being able to live a contented life, being able to be relaxed, being able to be present with those we love, to have social connections that are deep and meaningful. And so the practice that's been recommended to me and that I recommend to everybody is to just really take notice of the things in your life that are good every single day. So this is called three good things. That's the research is on the intervention of three good things and how it can help us to rewire our brains to notice the positive things that are going on around us, because there are lots of them, but our brains have filtered those things out because they're not threats. But we also know that evolutionary, biologically, we have thrived as a species because of our social connections, because we can overcome things as a group, that as individuals, we're not that strong. So there is also an imperative to pick up on the positive things that are happening. So this is what I recommend to you. So at the end of each day, you take a minute and you reflect back over three good things that happened throughout the day. You know, anything from I had a nice conversation with my brother to I watched this show and it really touched me and I felt like it made me feel good about life, or I stepped outside in the rain and I felt the rain on my face. And what this does is, at the end of each day, it's like a little shot of the emotion that you experienced earlier in the day when that positive thing was taking place. So you compound the positivity, you reinforce it, and you're able to revisit it and to ruminate upon it. So that day by day, our brains begin to pick up more on those positive things that are around us. We're seeing that, oh, that was a really kind gesture that I just saw from one person to another that I might have slipped my notice, or that you're on the on ramp and you're gonna let somebody drive by, without getting angered that they didn't let you come on the road or whatever. So there's really sound research about doing this for 2 weeks. Basically, if you take note each day for 2 weeks of three good things that happened, the scores for depression go down, scores for well-being go up, sense of balance between home life and work life increases, up to a year after the intervention. So 2 weeks, the intervention. So that 2 weeks of doing this thing has a result on your well-being up to 6 months and a year into the future, which is on par with typical antidepressant medications like SSRIs. So it has the potential to have a really profound effect on how we perceive the world around us, what we pick up on day to day, what we remember when we think back on a day. Did you ever have this? I have this with my kids all the time. We'll have a great day, we'll have a great outing, it'll be fun, but then there's some kind of conflict at the end of the day, and then I'm just left feeling like, oh man, there was that fight that day, when really there was all kinds of good stuff that happened before that. And it takes a little bit of effort to call that to mind, to sort of ruminate upon the good feelings that were part of that, and to expand that positivity in your consciousness. And I really feel like this is endemic. This is widespread, that we all have been trained to pick up on so much negativity. And I mean, just looking at what's going on with our country politically, we're just so divided. We think of ourselves in these very firm ways, and it limits our ability to connect with others socially and to empathize with each other, and to see ourselves in other people, and to recognize that we are connected with each other, and that I cannot be well and healthy if you are not well and healthy. That we are intimately connected, and that we have to depend upon other people. To me, this is one of the biggest things we learned from the pandemic, was that our social connections, our ability to see one another, to talk with one another, to support one another, these are the most important things in our lives. I work with a lot of people at the end of their lives. Nobody is saying at the end of their lives, they wish they had made more money, or they wish they had made more time to golf, you know. What people do say is like, I wish that I had spent more time with my family. I wish that I had better connection with my son. And, those are the things that people are left with at the end of their lives. So I just want to lift that up for you all as I start to come to close, is that, for me, as a parent of kids and a wife who's just gone back to the office, this fall has really felt like a time where like it's this unspoken, I mean, maybe it's spoken, but there's this feeling that like, all right, let's get back to it, folks. Let's get back to the grind, right? And I'm just like, this pain in my back is telling me we can't just get back to the grind. I cannot personally, for my own well-being, just shoulder all this burden on into the future. It won't be sustainable. And I don't think for any of us getting back to the level of, here in New Jersey, New York, just like this metro area, I mean, everywhere, but especially around here, it's like we're a fast-paced culture, right? And if anything, I just really hope that we can take from this pandemic that we have got to slow down. We've got to recognize what's really important in our lives. Some of those things that are just taking it out of us and they're not refilling our souls and our spirits, we've got to leave those things aside so that we can prioritize those that we love. We can prioritize our own well-being, our own, ability to connect with God, with nature, with those around us. To me, this is the real takeaway, is that life is fragile and we have to prioritize what's important. And for me today, that means taking better care of myself. It means resting, not shouldering so much burden so that I'm not, hobbling about, unable to like turn my head. And so that's about what I've got for you folks. Um, I hope that I've been able to give you a little glimpse into some of the struggle we faced here, personally, how that's affected me, and then some of what I've taken as far as, things that I hope that we can learn as a culture and as a society and as individuals from everything we've been through. So I don't know if we've had any questions come up. I'm happy to chat with you all through the question and answer function here.
Thank you so much, Mason. As always, makes my kind of heart sit down and really very, it's wonderful to listen to. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm sure it's been very helpful. I think that we're all kind of sick of hearing about COVID, but it's still there. And it, like Mason just said, if we're not kind of aware of stuff, it shows up in different areas, whether it be physical issues or irritability or not being able to sleep. So I just think it's for all we've been through, it's important to just keep all these things in mind. I've worked with with some first responders and some people in different fields, such as like even cops. And what they've said is they've recognized how much their emotional mental health, how important it is. It's set a lot in perspective for a lot of people. There's always a silver lining, right? And one of those silver linings for a lot of people is perspective. Recognizing their emotional mental health is incredibly important. And yes, when you speak about gratitude, I know that got a lot of our staff through. So thank you for reminding me of those important things. I appreciate it.